everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Crazy stuff to talk about today. So we're finishing up World War II here. Stuff gets crazy in the Pacific. Atomic weapons get used on civilians. And who's being held responsible for the Holocaust? Alright, a lot of crazy stuff to get through today. Let's get started. So the United States now knows that Russia is planning on helping out an invasion of Japan at this point in November of 1945. So we're in the summertime of 1945, or the spring and moving into the summer of 1945. And America kind of feels like we're on our own out here in the Pacific, and in large part we are. Not that people don't want to support us, it's just everybody's really out of resources, and America is still having to fight against Japan. So Japan owns thousands of islands throughout the Pacific. And on this map, all these little dots all over the place are different islands that Japan owns. The idea of trying to take over each one of those islands just seems impossible. So the game plan early on, set by MacArthur, who was forced to leave the Philippines to start this war, is this concept of island hopping. You don't have to take over all the islands, just take over the necessary ones that allows you to get closer to Japan. If you can take over Japan, all the other islands will automatically surrender. That is the thought process here. So the United States is going to methodically move across the Pacific, taking over important islands. Now that the Japanese Navy is not as strong as the American Navy after the Battle of Midway, a lot of these things that were taken over by Japan get liberated from Japan. One of the first ones is the Philippines. This is a very famous picture of Douglas MacArthur as he is literally walking back onto the Philippines, because he said, I shall return. He said, I will return to the Philippines. And this is a photograph of him actually doing that. So after they take over the Philippines, which is a very important strategic stronghold, the motivation becomes what gives America the best option of being able to take over Japan. Well, there's an island that is of absolute extreme importance to the United States and this war effort, and it's the island of Okinawa. So Okinawa has a fully functioning airport. That's really important. If you want to take over Japan, you have to have an airport so that you can bomb them or have get supplies in. You need a fully functioning airport, and Okinawa has that. Because while you have aircraft carriers, they just take off little jets. You need straight up bombers, which are like the big rigs as far as airplanes are concerned. They need to be able to fly over Japan and bomb them, and you need an airport for that. Nowhere else around at the time has an airport that's still functioning that is vulnerable to America being able to take it over. So Okinawa, that's going to be the focus. The problem is Japan knows this. Japan knows America wants Okinawa, so it is extremely well fortified. Before America, or before we Americans can attack Okinawa, we have to have an island near Okinawa just to be able to prepare for the attack on Okinawa. So America looks around, and we pick this island called Iwo Jima. All right. So the whole point of Iwo Jima, all right, is just to have a landing area, basically a base of operations to be able to attack Okinawa. So Iwo Jima is just like basically an uninhabited little island in the middle of the Pacific. So the Americans invade Okinawa, expecting it to be empty. We'd like surround it with our ships and blown it up. We get there. This is a very famous picture. This is a colorized, one of the most famous American pictures of the troops putting up the American flag like they have taken over Okinawa. Little do they know that actually right after this picture is taken, vicious fighting takes place on Okinawa, or on Iwo Jima, because the Japanese soldiers that were stationed on Iwo Jima had dug underground and had waited for the American troops to come onto the island before the fighting started. Thousands of Americans and thousands of Japanese soldiers are killed here at Iwo Jima. What America realizes is the Japanese soldiers would rather fight to the death than surrender. Even the generals. The generals would commit suicide before they would get captured. This gives Americans a lot more anxiety with this idea that if we actually try to invade Japan, the mainland Japan, how is that going to work out? But after Iwo Jima, it basically allows America the ability to get set up in order to invade Okinawa. This is massive. This is D-Day level intensity. This is a photograph, again, colorized, because it's beautiful in the Pacific out here. So it's like this blue water, corresponding with the military and the horrific things that happened on Okinawa. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people died on Okinawa. Not only that, Okinawa, having a fully functioning airport, had a full population of people. Tons of civilians get killed in this battle over Okinawa. It is absolutely horrific. It is awful. You can see here in this picture of the Battle of Okinawa that America brings in tanks with flamethrowers on the end of it. We literally would burn people alive in war. This ends up being so controversial after the war that there's actually, after this war, and we'll talk about it today, there's like rules to war afterwards. You can't use flamethrowers. And they point to Okinawa and the other times that it got used as how inhumane using flamethrowers is in war. But at the time, it wasn't against the rules. But because the vicious fighting that takes place here, it becomes illegal after the war. But Okinawa eventually gets captured. So now America has a fully functioning airport. What does America do with this fully functioning airport? Well, exactly what we were planning on. It is time to start attacking mainland Japan. Now, this is the summertime of 1945. There's no such thing as atomic weapons, and we'll talk about it here in a second. We're just buying time until Russia will help an invasion of Japan. All right, because Russia, it's VE Day, or, victory in Europe's already over. Russia still needs a few months to prep to help America invade in Japan. A big thing that Japan, or that Russia wants here, so Japan owns, all of Asia. Russia says, hey, when we come help out America, we fully expect to be able to get most of the stuff that Japan has. We want their land too. America's trying to play dumb to this, be like, we'll talk about it later. But Russia sees this as an opportunity to spread their borders as well. So America, with Japan, we have to kind of soften them up, prepare, because we have no intent of invading prior to Russia helping us out. So America flies over Japan nonstop after we take over Okinawa in firebombing raids. This is an actual photograph, a colored photograph taken at the time of Tokyo after America had flown over in the middle of the night and set it on fire. We are attacking civilian populations. We want Japan to surrender. Japan absolutely has no intention of surrendering, but we are literally dropping fire bombs on civilian populations. This right here, these are the planes that would be used for dropping the fire bombs. And again, the whole purpose of us doing this is Harry Truman just waiting here on Stalin. It took me a while to figure. I didn't realize they had a picture together, honestly. This is Truman waiting on Stalin to get his troops ready to this invasion. Because again, if it goes well, America expects we could lose 1 million troops in this mainland invasion of Japan. So we are really kind of at Russia's mercy here of when they're willing to come get involved. We don't want to ask their help. We absolutely do not want to have to ask their help, but they're the only ones that are strong enough and willing to come help us out with Japan. So firebombing and just waiting for Russia to get ready so that we can invade Japan. So the question here is, why did the Allies need the island of Okinawa? All right, so Pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So this brings us back to J. Robert Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project. So, to jog your memory, this is J. Robert Oppenheimer. He'd been given the job. See if he can develop an atomic bomb. Albert Einstein had realized that Germany had came up with the science behind it and was afraid Hitler would create the atomic bomb. So he told FDR, and FDR basically hired this guy with a blank check to see if he could build it. J. Robert Oppenheimer, sitting basically in a gym, I imagine, at Columbia University in Manhattan, and this project's called the Manhattan Project, but he has over 600,000 people. 60% of 1 million people. 600,000 people around the country working on this bomb, and they have no idea what they're working on. They're working on like individual parts, and then they meld their individual part off, and I imagine he's sitting there with opening boxes and snapping things together. Hitler clearly never created the atomic bomb, or he absolutely would have used it. FDR died. Alright, and Truman got taken over. It is so secret, Truman didn't even know that this was a project until he became the president. As the vice president of the United States, he didn't even know this was getting worked on. So as everybody's just waiting here to see if Russia to get involved, J. Robert Oppenheimer's like, snap. Huh. I think I got it. So he runs over to Truman. His White House like, hey, I think we got it. And Truman's like, got what? And Oppenheimer's like, the atomic bomb that we've been working on for years, I think we got it. And Truman's like, well, have you tested it? He said, no, but it should work. And Truman's like, well, go test it and tell me if it works first. So J. Robert Oppenheimer is like, fine. So he goes out and makes a small scale version of it, all right, and goes out in the New Mexico desert and tests it. This is a photograph of the very first test of the atomic bomb. It's a very small version of that. Now, yeah, this is a huge explosion. There's really no context here in this picture to show you how big this is. And again, this is not the one that would be used. This is a smallest version they can make. So this is a picture, colorized. It was a black and white picture. It's a colorized one. I like this one. This is not the first test. This is not the same test as this one, but it's the same size bomb. And this is actually a year later. But I like this picture better for context for teaching here. This is the same size bomb as this one. Again, smallest they can make. If you look closely at the picture, those little black lines that are in the horizon, those are battleships. This is a catastrophically big explosion. This is about the size of a suitcase, is how big this bomb is. The bomb they're going to use, because they're going to make two of them, they had to make a special designed plane because it would barely fit in a classroom. Catastrophically big. When J. Robert Oppenheimer sees this explosion, specifically this one, he makes a very famous statement that is kind of associated with J. Robert Oppenheimer. He says, I am become death, the destroyer of the world. That's not a typo. I think it's important that they have kept this misspeak, just because he just said it. He wasn't right. He was like, I'm the destroyer of worlds. And he kind of misspeaks on it because he is shocked. He's like, what have I done? Because without him, this wouldn't have happened. Hitler wasn't getting it. The science was there. But if somebody probably would have eventually figured it out, it's because Eisenhower figured it out. But J. Robert Oppenheimer was like, what have I done? And Truman looks at this and he says, yes, I see a way of keeping Russia out of this war. So the question here is, why didn't Truman know about the atomic bomb at first? Like, why didn't Truman know about it when it was getting built? Why did Truman not even learn about it until basically it was finished? So pause me, answer that completely, and we'll move on. So this is a lot of debate on the use of the atomic bomb. Should America have used the atomic bomb? Massive debate forever. Because, again, do you sacrifice a lot to save a few? You know, but this one's more complicated. Because the argument is, if America invades Japan, that 1 million American soldiers could die. If you use these bombs, you could end the war and save American lives. The key there is save American lives. Using atomic weapons does not save lives. So that is the argument that gets used a lot, is that by using the atomic bombs, you can end the war early and it saves American lives. Truman thinks about this for about 2 seconds before he says use it absolutely right now. Because if you end the war before November, guess who you don't have to share Asia with? Russia. Russia, they're kind of in the driver's seat here because they knew America desperately needed them. As soon as we get the atomic bomb, America, basically without question, uses it. The first test that I showed you was July 16th. This is August 5th. It's not even a month later. And they get a big one. Over in the Pacific, they have to build a special plane for it here called the Enola Gay to use the atomic bomb. So, America chooses not to drop the atomic bomb on Tokyo, one of the most popular, the kind of the capital, the hub of Japan, or Kyoto, which is their historical city. Kyoto is a city in Japan that had basically not been attacked at all in World War II, basically because it has all of Japan's history. And how did Japan go to about taking over the world? They had just been discounted forever. America aggressively wants to know who Japan is and wants Japan's history so that America can learn why were we overlooking them for so long. On August 5th, 1945, they picked the city of Hiroshima, a city that basically had not been attacked at all. Let's be very clear here. This is not a military target. This is civilians. America targets civilians with the atomic bomb, trying to make it so horrific that Japan surrenders. There's no military strategy to this. There's no military base here in Hiroshima. This is a civilian city that is going to get hit with the first nuclear weapon. So the Enola Gay flies over, drops the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. This is an actual photograph taken from the back of the Enola Gay when it is detonated. The mushroom cloud basically hits the atmosphere. Yes, I can tell you all these stats of how big this is, like how tall it was, how wide it was. That was the loudest sound ever heard on Earth. It was the brightest light ever seen on Earth. The best way I can explain this that stuck in me is like, oh, wow. The atomic bomb was dropped in Japan. Okay? The people in China saw it. That's how big it was. Let me give you a couple pictures here. This is Hiroshima before the atomic bomb. Full-on, massively populated civilian city. One bomb gets dropped. This is Hiroshima afterwards. Complete annihilation of hundreds of thousands of civilians. Just wiped them out. America tells Japan to surrender. They say, nope. We say, we'll drop another one on you. Japan says, do it. And we say, we will. 3 days later, on August 8th, this is the city of Nagasaki. Also had not been attacked. One bomb completely annihilates the entire city. We then tell Russia immediately declares war on Japan during this time. Like, oh, we're declaring war because, Russia wants to take Japan stuff. And America's like, no, Russia, you wait till November. We got this. So Russia declares war, and we're like, no, stay out of this. They're not ready for an invasion, but they realize they've lost their window here because America has this new weapon. All right? Even though Russia declares war and it looks like there's going to be an invasion, America absolutely would have dropped another bomb had we had another one. It takes a while to make them. But now that we know they work, we start mass producing them 100 at a time. It takes almost a month before Japan, realizing we're just going to keep dropping these things, and they surrender. and Japan officially surrenders at the end of World War II because of the atomic bomb. Russia, who's going to be our rival real quick after World War II, says, what in the world does America have? And Russia says, we want one. And Russia is going to very quickly be motivated to get their own atomic weapons. But the war ends, and it's called Victory in Japan Day, VJ Day, and World War II is officially over. So the question here is, why was Nagasaki chosen and not Kyoto or Tokyo as a location for the first atomic bomb? And I think I mentioned this, but I want to clarify. Nagasaki, so Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Nagasaki interchange. Why were the cities chosen and not Tokyo, where all their leaders were, and Kyoto? So Kyoto is their history. We didn't want to destroy their history because America wanted to learn about Japan and why had we overlooked them for so long? The other one, all right, the reason it wasn't Tokyo is that is where the emperor was. That is where Hideki Tojo was. That's where all the leaders are. If you annihilate their leaders, there's nobody left to surrender and they'll just fight forever. So we had to make sure the leadership stayed intact so that somebody would surrender because had you taken out their leadership, they may not have surrendered. So that is why the Kyoto or Tokyo were not chosen. So answer that completely. Pause me and we'll move on. All right, Nuremburg trials. War's over. Everybody's like, oh gosh, can't believe that's over. But everybody had just learned about this thing that will become known as the Holocaust that happened in Europe. And everybody looks over there and says, what? This is like next level horror. Keep in mind, America just dropped nuclear bombs on civilian cities. But that's the horror, meaning the concentration camps and the Holocaust. So Germany, when they find out what has happened and how they had been completely hoodwinked, all right, and they had basically fallen hook, line, and sinker for Hitler, nobody hates Hitler more than the German people. They realized they messed up, they allowed this man to come to power, and they hate him with a passion. So when the war ends, all of Hitler's henchmen, was Hitler's killed himself. All of Hitler's top men get arrested when they figure out the Holocaust, that what has happened. Because of that, Germany asked the world, hey, can we put these men on trial? And the rest of the world's like, absolutely not, Germany. You allowed this to happen. You don't get to be in charge of putting them on trial. And they say, please, I'll tell you what we'll do. We will try them. We will put them on trial. We will let it be video. We will let the whole world watch this up one side and down the other. Let us determine what happens to these men, all right, that basically ran the Holocaust. If you, meaning the rest of the world, if you don't like what our end result is, what our end determination is, basically what our idea for punishment is for these men, the rest of the world can step in and make a different one. But let us have first shot at it. Let us redeem ourselves. We will never be able to live with this. Because again, the German people had turned a blind eye to this until it was too late. And so the German people it hit them right in their soul where they realized they had messed up. So they round up 24 of Hitler's men. These are all the men that had any that came up with the ideas of the Holocaust. And so what do you charge them with? They're like, guys, it was wartime. Anything's legal in wartime. So Nuremberg is a city in Germany. So these trials are the Nuremberg trials, which take place in Nuremberg, which is in Germany. No. This isn't, you weren't trying to win the war. You were just murdering people for the sake of murdering them. That is going to be a new term called crimes against humanity. Now, the difference is, they were killing civilians. America dropped atomic bombs on civilians in Japan. But the logic is, America did that to win the war, to stop killing. There is no benefit to just murdering people in the Holocaust. Those are different things. And honestly, it's going to be quite a while before people look back on the atomic bombs and be like, wait a minute. Was that evil too? It's going to be a long time before those conversations start being had over ethics, morals, where's the line in war? Was it necessary? What happens if America didn't drop the atomic bomb? But anyway, in the Nuremberg trials, of Hitler's top 24 men, 12 are tried, and so they go through each one of them. It is recorded. It's on television. Everybody watches it. 12 of the 24 are executed immediately. Not taken out back, but they are sentenced to death. The other 12 are sentenced to life in prison and solitary confinement for the rest of their lives. However, there were like thousands of people who ran the actual concentration camps that got off scot-free. And the rest of the world was really concerned about this at first until they realized when you ask those soldiers, why did you do these horrible things? And they said, I was just following orders. There's been a lot of science experiments on human nature. But when it's to go kill innocent people, surely you won't follow those orders. Crazily human nature, and I wish I could do a whole class on it. Human nature, if you are being told to do something by somebody that's in a sense of authority, you will most likely do that even if it's ethically wrong. And they're able to prove that here in the Nuremberg trials, and then everybody else is like, we think Germany's letting these people off scot-free. And then throughout the rest of the world, when they redo these trials and see how human nature acts, a lot of times most humans will do really messed up stuff if they are being told to do it by somebody in authority. So that's why most of the people that actually ran the concentration camps will go free. They'll be traumatized for the rest of their life. Absolutely horrific. The suicide rate by people who ran the concentration camps is one of the highest of any groups of people coming out of any war in the history of the world. But the Nuremberg trials ends and kind of allows Germany to start saving some face that we were wrong on that. It is, you cannot deny that Germany is very strict today on the Holocaust, that it is mandatory teaching. You can't deny it. You can't pretend it was something else. You can't justify it. Germany has very much owned this evil part of their history and have taken responsibility because they realized that they were responsible for allowing it to happen. So the question here is, why was Germany allowed to take part in the Nuremberg trials? Like, why were they allowed to put these men on trial? What were the stipulations on that? So answer that completely. Pause me if you need to. And we're going to move on. Now, I want to talk about something real quick here, where America likes to go good guy, bad guy a lot. During World War II in the United States, we talk about crimes against humanity, all right? And we see how awful it is. I can't believe you treat Jews like that in Europe. America during World War II rounded up anybody in America, especially if you lived on the West Coast, of Japanese descent, and put them in minimum security prisons with their families during World War II. They're called internment camps. America put an entire race of people in jail during World War II because America was afraid they would be spies. Most of these people were born in America and are American citizens. So now this is not the concentration camps. They were not subject to hard labor. They were fed. That it was different. So I don't want to make, because they both are camps. One's internment camps in America and then like concentration camps in Germany. But how crazy is it that America, who is horrified by the way everybody else is doing things, also takes a whole race of people based on their race and puts them in camps, and using mass weapons against civilian populations? Now, it is different. It is absolutely different. The atomic bombs were used to win the war. It had an ends to a mean. It wasn't just to murder people, to murder them like the Holocaust. Absolutely was not. The concentration camps are astronomically worse than the internment camps. But where do you draw the line? The fact that could happen in America really let a lot of people start thinking after World War II, how do we monitor ourselves going forward? Like where is the line for human nature, right? What is an anomaly and what is just unacceptable? So all these dots right here are different places in America where there were these internment camps for Japanese Americans. But they thought they were spies, and there's no evidence for that at all. The entire war, there's nothing to back that idea up. So the question here is, why did America put the Japanese Americans in internment camps in World War II? And then after World War II, they released them, you can go back to living your life after all their property had been taken to pay for the war effort. It's not until 1988, like 40 years later, that the United States government reimburses those Japanese Americans for their massive losses. And it was only about 10% of their actual losses. It was 40 years later before the United States government said, our bad. Anyway, answer that completely, and we're done.